Beneath Chicago's blazing studio lights, a black educator's legacy was scorned as a diversity gimmick. Her bold truth stunned the nation. It unmasked a host's prejudice and sparked a fierce reckoning on live television. Lena Carter smoothed the collar of her navy blazer. Her fingers quivered as she perched on a stiff, gray couch in WCN Studios' green room in Chicago. The air conditioner's hum clashed with the warmth spreading through her chest. Her dark gaze flicked toward the wall clock. 9:45 a.m. She had 15 minutes before her segment on The Daily Pulse, a well-known morning talk show. It was notorious for piercing interviews and sharp controversy. Its reputation hung over her like a dark cloud, ready to unleash its fury. At 38, Lena was a black woman from Xenia, Ohio. She had dedicated the past decade to creating a community education program that revolutionized struggling schools. Her initiative recently earned a national award for innovation. This secured her an invitation to the show. She had hoped it would amplify her mission, but now it felt like a snare. Her stomach churned with an unshakable instinct. The suspicion began when she received the producer's email 2 weeks prior. Its tone was excessively polished, almost scripted. The words, "We'd love to feature your story of diversity in education," once inspired her. Now they carried a chilling undertone she couldn't dismiss. She'd arrived ahead of schedule. Her practical heels tapped against the polished studio floor. Each echo reverberated through the vast hallway as she approached the green room. Her weathered leather satchel hung over her shoulder. It brimmed with notes, awards, and data that validated her program's success. Graduation rates had soared by 30%. Dropout rates were cut in half. These numbers had become her mantra over the years. They represented the faces of students she'd uplifted. She thought of Jamal, who'd transformed from a dropout risk into a college freshman. She remembered Maria, who'd confided that Lena's program gave her the courage to aspire to medical school. Their faces flashed through her mind as she steadied her nerves. Her heart felt heavy with the responsibility of their faith. She sensed that faith slipping away as the reality of this interview loomed larger. Stepping into the green room, she noticed a young assistant. He barely glanced up from his tablet. His glasses caught the harsh fluorescent glow as he muttered, "Miss Carter, we'll mic you up soon." His disinterest struck her like a cold wave. Her thoughts drifted to countless instances of being overlooked. School boards had scoffed at her proposals. Principals had labeled her too idealistic. Colleagues had whispered that her achievements were mere luck. The sting of being undervalued sank deep. She gripped the satchel tighter. It felt like an anchor against the storm she sensed brewing. Her dark gaze flickered with both fear and resolve. That determination had been forged through years of battles. They taught her to stand firm even when the ground beneath her seemed to crumble. The green room felt sterile. Its beige walls looked dull under the fluorescent lights. A faint aroma of coffee lingered from a half-empty pot on the counter. The scent pulled Lena back to her early days in Xenia. She'd sat in her cramped community center office with a mug in hand. She pored over grant applications then, her fingers smudged with ink. She had fought for every dollar to sustain her program. Those days contrasted sharply with the sleek chaos of this studio. The disparity made her feel out of place. Her simple blazer and practical heels clashed with the polished efficiency of the staff. They bustled around her, their voices a steady hum. It deepened her sense of isolation. Her thoughts wandered to the day she'd shared news of the award with her mother. Her mother's voice had crackled over the phone with pride. "You did it, baby. You showed 'em what you're made of." That memory anchored her now. It reminded her of her purpose. It was why she couldn't retreat, even as every instinct urged her to flee the confrontation awaiting her. The monitor on the wall sprang to life. Its glow cast stark shadows across the room. It displayed the live broadcast, a segment on celebrity fashion. The host's cheerful laughter felt like a cruel contrast to the tempest within Lena. Her fingers tightened on her satchel as the segment concluded. The screen faded briefly, then a transition card emerged. Coming up next, diversity in education. Merit or mandate? Lena's breath hitched. Her pulse raced as the implication cut through her like a razor. Her worst fears were confirmed. This wasn't a platform to celebrate her work, it was a stage to dismantle it. The phrase merit or mandate rang in her ears like a taunt. It challenged everything she'd fought for. Her dark gaze narrowed with resolve. She hadn't felt this fire since the day she confronted a school board intent on shutting down her program years ago. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with fierce determination. She would defend her legacy. She would defend the students who trusted her. She would defend the truth she'd built over a decade. Her chest rose with each breath as she braced for the battle ahead. The weight of the moment felt heavy, but her spirit remained unyielding. She whispered to herself, "You've faced worse. You'll get through this." Lena settled into her seat on the set of the Daily Pulse. Her palms felt damp as she faced the host, Victoria Hayes. The veteran broadcaster's platinum blonde hair shimmered under the studio lights. Her icy blue eyes were sharp and unyielding. Her smile was a polished facade that never reached her gaze. Her reputation for ruthless interviews cast a shadow over the glass table separating them. The studio lights threw stark reflections. They echoed the storm surging in Lena's chest. Her modest blazer felt like a fragile barrier against the conflict she knew was imminent. Her dark gaze swept the set. The backdrop's soft blues and purples created a deceptive calm. The audience sat in orderly rows. Their expressions mixed curiosity and disinterest. Cameras loomed like silent predators. They captured every gesture and emotion. Their lenses reminded her that millions were watching. They were waiting for her to falter or break under pressure. She'd faced pressure before, but never on this scale. The stakes had never been this high in front of a national audience. Victoria leaned forward. Her voice was smooth as velvet, yet cut like a blade. "Lena Carter, founder of the Carter Education Initiative, a small-town success story. Congratulations on your national award." Her words were a deceptive lure. They made Lena's shoulders stiffen. Her dark gaze narrowed as she nodded. "Thank you for having me," she replied. Her tone stayed steady despite the tremor in her chest. Her mind raced to predict the strike she knew was coming. Her heart pounded like a war drum. She braced herself. Her fingers brushed the edge of her satchel. The worn leather grounded her. It reminded her of the years she'd poured into her program. Late nights drafting proposals, early mornings mentoring students, endless meetings with parents and teachers. They had all placed their faith in her vision. Now she felt that faith slipping away. Victoria's smile tightened. Her blue eyes glinted with something close to disdain. Lena recognized that look. It had shadowed her career. It screamed she didn't belong. It told her she'd never belong, no matter how many accolades she earned or lives she transformed. Victoria flipped through her cue cards with deliberate slowness. Her smile hardened like stone. "Let's dive in. Your program has transformed schools in Ohio," she began. "But some critics argue that initiatives like yours thrive on diversity mandates. They say your award might owe more to politics than merit." Her words struck Lena like a blow. The studio air grew heavy with tension. The audience shifted uneasily in their seats. Their murmurs buzzed softly in Lena's ears. The accusation stung. It reminded her of every time she'd been diminished to a token. Her heart sank under the weight of being dismissed again. Her thoughts raced to her students. She saw Jamal's shy grin as he showed her his college acceptance letter. She recalled Maria's tearful embrace at her high school graduation. Those memories had fueled her purpose. Now, Victoria's words threatened to erase them. Lena's hands clenched into fists. She resisted the urge to walk off the set. Her chest tightened with anger and despair. Her dark gaze burned with a fire. It had simmered since she'd seen the transition card in the green room. That fire now threatened to blaze. She needed to harness it. She had to channel it into a force to counter the injustice being thrown at her on live television. A young stagehand, Marcus Evans, halted mid-step near the cameras. He was a black man in his early 20s with a lanyard swinging from his neck. His brown eyes flashed with outrage as he overheard Victoria's words. His own encounters with prejudice in the industry stirred deep anger. His jaw tightened. He shot Lena a look of solidarity. The subtle gesture warmed her heart amid the chaos. His presence reminded her she wasn't entirely alone. The odds might be stacked against her, but she had an ally. Marcus's mind raced with memories of his struggles. He'd been overlooked for promotions. He'd heard whispers about his attitude when he spoke up. Those experiences left scars he carried daily. Now they throbbed as he watched Lena endure the same dismissal. His hands trembled as he adjusted the water bottles on a nearby table. His pulse quickened. He felt the urge to act. He wanted to support her. He needed her to know she wasn't facing this battle alone. His brown eyes met hers for a brief moment. It was a silent vow. He'd stand by her, no matter the risk. In the control room, producer Sarah Klein flinched at Victoria's tone. She was a white woman in her 30s clutching a clipboard. Her own experiences witnessing bias in her career stirred unease. Her fingers tapped nervously against the clipboard. She whispered to a colleague, "This isn't right. She doesn't deserve this." Her disapproval offered a faint glimmer of hope. It steadied Lena's resolve. Her dark gaze hardened with determination. She prepared to push back. Her voice rose within her like a wave ready to break. Sarah's thoughts drifted to an early moment in her career. She'd seen a black colleague passed over for a promotion. The guilt of her silence then weighed heavily now. It urged her to act. She wanted to speak up. She needed to right the wrong unfolding before her. Her grip tightened on the clipboard. She silently vowed to support Lena. She'd do so even if it meant challenging Victoria. She'd risk her own position if necessary. Her heart raced with fear and resolve. Her colleague nodded in agreement. They shared a glance of mutual concern. The control room air felt charged. It was as tense as the studio below. Lena sensed that tension. It fueled her determination. Her dark gaze locked onto Victoria's. Her defiance made the host's smile waver for a second. That brief falter gave Lena the spark she needed. She would keep fighting. She'd turn this moment of humiliation into something greater. It could shift the narrative not just for her, but for everyone watching who'd ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told they didn't belong. Victoria's voice sliced through the studio like a shard of glass. Her blue eyes glinted with a cold challenge as she leaned closer to Lena. "Let's be honest, Lena. Some say your program's success stems from federal diversity funding, not your actual work." The deliberate jab landed hard. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Her dark eyes blazed with a fire that had been simmering since she'd first stepped onto the set. The injustice felt like a heavy weight, threatening to crush her resolve. Her mind raced back to countless nights spent hunched over her desk, writing grant proposals until her fingers ached. She thought of the endless hours mentoring students, their hopeful faces lighting up as they shared their dreams with her. All of that hard work, all of those victories, were now being reduced to a cheap talking point on live TV. The audience murmured softly. Tension crackled in the air like static before a storm. Lena felt the weight of every gaze fixed on her. The shame of being publicly dismantled burned in her chest. It was a bitter pill she refused to swallow. Her hands clenched into fists under the glass table. She fought to keep her composure, her nails digging into her palms. Her heart pounded with a fierce realization. She had to fight back. If she didn't, she risked losing everything she'd built, her program, her legacy, the trust of the students who looked up to her. Their faces flooded her thoughts. She saw Jamal's shy smile as he told her about his first day at college. She remembered Maria's tearful gratitude at her graduation, whispering, "You made me believe I could do this." Those memories fueled her. She couldn't let Victoria erase their victories with a single cruel sentence. Her resolve hardened like steel. She wouldn't let this moment define her as a victim. She'd fought too hard, too long to let that happen. Marcus, the stagehand, took a hesitant step closer to the set. His hands trembled as he clutched a water bottle meant for the table. His conscience battled with his fear of speaking out. He'd seen what happened to people who challenged the status quo in this industry. He'd been on the receiving end of it himself. Passed over for promotions, dismissed as too emotional, when he tried to speak up about unfair treatment. Those memories weighed on him now. His pulse raced, his throat tight with anxiety. But as he looked at Lena, he saw the same pain in her eyes that he'd felt so many times. He couldn't stay silent. He set the bottle down with a quiet thud. The sound seemed louder in the tense studio. His voice was low but firm as he addressed Victoria. "With all due respect, ma'am, she hasn't been given a fair chance to respond. Her work speaks for itself." His words were a quiet rebellion. They shifted the energy in the room. The audience's murmurs grew louder, a ripple of surprise spreading through the crowd. A woman in the front row whispered to her neighbor, "Did he just say that?" Her voice held a mix of shock and admiration. Marcus's brown eyes met Lena's. A spark of courage passed between them. It lit a fire within her. The unexpected support felt like a lifeline. She seized it with both hands. Her voice rose with renewed strength as she turned back to Victoria. "I won't sit here and let you erase my work," she declared. Her tone was unyielding. Her dark eyes locked onto Victoria's with defiance. The host faltered. Her confident smirk wavered for the first time. The tension in the room crackled like a storm about to break. In the control room, Sarah Klein gripped her clipboard so tightly her knuckles turned white. Guilt gnawed at her as she watched the scene unfold. She'd seen bias play out too many times in her career. She remembered a colleague, a black woman named Tanya, who'd been overlooked for a lead producer role despite her qualifications. Sarah had stayed silent then, afraid of rocking the boat. That memory haunted her now. She'd whispered to her colleague earlier, "This isn't right." Those words echoed in her mind. The guilt transformed into a burning resolve. She wanted to intervene. She needed to do something, even if it meant stepping out of her role. She turned to her colleague, her voice urgent. "We can't let this go on. She deserves better." Her colleague nodded, his expression grim. The control room buzzed with unease. Lena sensed the shift in the air. Marcus's courage and Sarah's silent resolve gave her a glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone in this fight. The support, however small, bolstered her spirit. She thought of her students again, their dreams resting on her shoulders. She couldn't let them down. Her chest rose with a deep breath. She steadied herself for what came next. The studio felt charged, the air heavy with anticipation. The camera zoomed in, capturing every second. Lena stood on the edge of a reckoning. It was a moment neither she nor Victoria could have foreseen. Her heart beat with a mix of defiance and hope. She was ready to turn this battle into a turning point, not just for herself, but for everyone who'd ever been dismissed, ever been underestimated, ever been told their work didn't matter. Lena sat tall in her seat. Her modest blazer now symbolized her resilience. Her hands steadied as she leaned forward. Her voice cut through the studio's hum like a blade. She addressed Victoria directly. "You've questioned my merit without knowing who I am." Her tone was sharp enough to make Victoria flinch. Her words echoed through the studio, each syllable carrying the weight of her truth. "I'm Lena Carter, former advisor to the National Education Board. I've spent the last 15 years shaping policy that's changed lives across this country." The revelation dropped like a thunderclap. The entire studio fell silent. Shock thickened the air. Every head turned to Lena. Her identity struck like lightning. It shifted the balance of power in an instant. The audience gasped audibly. A young man in the back row whispered to his friend, "She's a national figure. I had no idea." His voice trembled with awe. A woman nearby clutched her purse, her eyes wide with disbelief. "All this time we thought she was just a small-town teacher," she murmured. The room buzzed with whispers. Lena's presence grew larger. She filled the space with undeniable authority. Her dark eyes swept over the crowd. She saw their shock, their newfound respect. It fueled her strength. Victoria's face drained of color. Her cue cards slipped from her hand with a faint rustle. They scattered across the glass table. Her earlier confidence crumbled like brittle leaves. She stammered, her blue eyes wide with disbelief. Her voice was barely a whisper. "That's impossible," she choked out. Her hands trembled as she tried to gather the cards. Her polished facade shattered. The audience watched in stunned silence. A teenage girl in the front row turned to her mother. "She's losing it," she whispered. Her mother nodded, her expression a mix of satisfaction and surprise. Victoria's unraveling was a stark contrast to Lena's steady calm. The host, who'd wielded her platform like a weapon, now looked small, exposed. Lena edged closer to the front of her seat. Her presence commanded the room. Her voice stayed steady, laced with quiet fury. Her words carried the weight of every struggle she'd faced to get here. She thought of the late nights spent drafting policy, her desk littered with coffee cups and crumpled drafts. She remembered the dismissive comments she'd endured, colleagues who'd sneered at her ideas, board members who'd questioned her credentials, all because of her skin. "I came here today to share my program's success," she said. Her tone was unwavering. "But what I found was a host steeped in bias, and as someone who's fought for fairness, I won't let that stand." The reversal was complete. Victoria's authority was stripped away. Lena sat tall in her seat, her hands no longer trembled. They were steady with purpose. Her posture reflected a leader who'd claimed her rightful place. The studio sat in awe. The cameras captured every second of the moment. A producer in the control room whispered to Sarah, "This is going viral. I can feel it." Sarah nodded, her eyes shining with relief. She had been part of this moment, however indirectly. Her decision to support Lena, even silently, felt validated. The audience began to murmur again. A man in the middle row turned to his wife. "She's incredible," he said. His wife nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "She's changing everything." Marcus, still near the cameras, felt his chest swell with pride. His small act of defiance had helped spark this shift. He thought back to the moment he'd decided to speak up. He'd been terrified, his palms sweaty, his heart racing, but seeing Lena now, seeing the power in her stance, made it all worth it. He realized the value of his courage. He whispered to himself, "I helped make this happen." His brown eyes shone with admiration. A fellow stagehand patted his shoulder. "You did good, man," he said quietly. Marcus nodded, a small smile breaking through his usual stoic expression. He felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known before. The moment would soon ripple across the nation. Lena's truth had turned the tables. She'd transformed humiliation into a powerful stand for justice. Her heart burned with pride in her identity. She thought of her journey from a small-town educator to a national advocate. She remembered the first classroom she'd taught in, the creaky desks and faded posters, where she'd promised her students they could be anything they dreamed. That promise had led her here. She felt the strength of her path. She was ready to lead the change she'd always fought for. The studio lights seemed brighter now, illuminating her in a new way. She wasn't just a guest on a talk show. She was a force, a voice for those who'd been silenced. Her chest swelled with a fierce pride. She knew this was only the beginning. Victoria sat motionless in her chair, her hands gripped the armrests tightly. The faint creak of the leather betrayed her unease. Her earlier poise had vanished, replaced by a stunned silence. She struggled to process Lena's revelation. The weight of her mistake pressed down on her like a tidal wave. Her blue eyes darted between Lena and the cameras. The audience's murmurs were a constant reminder of the spectacle she'd created. It was a spectacle that had now turned against her in a way she'd never anticipated. Her throat tightened. She felt the sting of her own words echoing back at her. Lena turned to her. Her expression softened just enough to offer a chance at redemption. Her voice was firm but not unkind. Her dark eyes searched Victoria's for a flicker of remorse. "I'm giving you a choice, Victoria," she said. Her words echoed with the authority she'd earned. "Acknowledge your bias and commit to fairness, or I'll ensure this show faces a public reckoning. I won't let prejudice fester here." The ultimatum hung in the air. It was heavy with the promise of accountability. Lena intended to keep that promise. Her stance remained unyielding as she waited for Victoria's response. Her heart pounded with the weight of the moment. This was a moment that could redefine the future of this platform and beyond. She thought of her students, their dreams, their futures. She couldn't let them down. Victoria hesitated. Her pride felt like a jagged shard, warring with the reality of her situation. Her mind flashed to the countless interviews she'd conducted over the years. She saw the faces of those she'd dismissed with a smile. Their stories had been reduced to sound bites for ratings. The realization stung with bitter clarity. Regret rose in her throat. She saw the depth of her error. She understood the harm she'd caused, not just to Lena, but to countless others who'd sat where she sat now. Their voices had been silenced by her questions. Their lives had been altered by her indifference. The weight of that truth pressed down on her. Her shoulders slumped. The fight drained from her as she nodded slowly. Her voice was low and shaky. The words felt foreign on her tongue. I was wrong, she admitted. Her confession was a jagged whisper. It echoed through the silent studio. I'll do better. I don't want this to define my legacy. The admission was a small victory, but it was monumental in its rarity. It was a crack in the armor of a woman who'd spent years wielding her platform like a weapon. Lena had forced that crack open with her courage. Her chest swelled with a fierce pride. She felt pride in her identity, in the movement she'd just ignited. That pride now mingled with a quiet fulfillment. She saw the first step toward change taking root. The audience sat in stunned silence. A man in the third row turned to his partner. "I never thought I'd hear her say that," he whispered. His partner nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. Lena nodded in acknowledgement. Her heart felt lighter as she absorbed Victoria's words. The tension in her shoulders eased. She exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Relief washed over her like a gentle wave. It mingled with the pride that still burned brightly within her. She was proud of the woman she'd become. She was proud of the legacy she was fighting to protect. She turned to the cameras, her dark eyes swept over the audience. Her voice was steady as she addressed the nation. Her words were a declaration of a new era for media and education. They carried the weight of every child she'd helped, every policy she'd shaped. "This platform will be a place of fairness, not prejudice," she announced. Her tone was unwavering. Each syllable was a vow etched into the air. And, "I'll work to ensure every educator's work is judged by merit, not bias." The audience erupted into applause. Their hands clapped fiercely. A young mother in the front row wiped a tear from her eye. Her voice trembled as she whispered to her daughter, "She's fighting for us, baby." Her gratitude was a testament to the ripple effect of Lena's courage. Marcus, near the cameras, gave Lena a small nod. His brown eyes shone with admiration. His hands clapped softly as he murmured, "You did it." His support was a reminder of the bond they'd forged in that moment of defiance. In the control room, Sarah Klein exhaled a shaky breath. Relief flooded through her. She'd felt helpless watching the confrontation unfold. Now she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She turned to her colleague. "I'm going to support her after this," she said firmly. "She's starting something big. We need to be part of it." Her colleague nodded, a determined glint in his eyes. Lena's words had sparked a fire in them all. 18 months later, the Daily Pulse had transformed into a beacon of change in the media landscape. Its reputation was no longer tied to controversy, but to fairness and inclusivity. The studio walls were now adorned with plaques, honoring the Carter Fairness Pledge. It was a commitment Lena had spearheaded to train journalists on equity and respect. It ensured that no one would be judged by their background again. The pledge was a legacy that honored the students she'd fought for. Lena's dark eyes misted with emotion. She traced the pledge's logo, a quill intertwined with an olive branch, painted on the studio doors. The symbol of truth and peace stirred a memory of her first classroom. She'd taught her students to dream beyond their circumstances there. That promise had come true in ways she could never have imagined. It now lived in every interview, every story, every changed heart that passed through these doors. Lena had become a respected advocate for educational equity. She worked closely with Marcus, who'd risen to become a segment producer for the show. His own experiences with prejudice fueled his passion. His voice was steady as he pitched stories that uplifted marginalized voices. His brown eyes were alight with the same fire that had sparked when he'd first stood up for Lena. That fire had grown into a blazing commitment to change. Marcus's hands no longer trembled as he handed out scripts. His fingers brushed against the cover of a proposal he'd helped write. The title, Voices of Equity, was a testament to the lessons he'd learned from Lena. He now passed those lessons on to others. He ensured the media would never again silence stories like hers. Sarah, the producer from the control room, had become a community liaison for the pledge. Her guilt from that day fueled her dedication. Her hands now held flyers for outreach events. Her laughter was a warm sound that filled the air during their monthly meetings with Lena. It was a sound she cherished. It reminded her of the bond they'd forged through shared struggle. That bond had grown into a partnership dedicated to uplifting their industry. They ensured no one would face the cameras alone, as Lena once had. At a national media conference, Lena stood on stage. Her modest blazer had been replaced by a sharp jacket that spoke of her new role. Her voice was steady as she addressed the crowd. Her dark eyes were alight with purpose. Each word was a vow that carried the weight of her journey. "Fairness isn't a privilege, it's a right," she declared. Her tone was resolute. It was a reminder of the power of standing up. It says that power had transformed a studio. It had transformed her. Her hands no longer clutched notes, but her heart still beat with the rhythm of the fight that had shaped her. It was a fight that now inspired others to rise. Marcus watched from the audience. His heart swelled with pride. The man who'd once feared speaking out was now a champion for change. His own journey was a testament to the ripple effect of Lena's courage. It was a change that would echo for generations. He was proud to be a part of it. His hands clapped fiercely as Lena's speech concluded. The applause was a symphony of hope that filled the room. From the perspective of the young journalists who filled the conference hall, Lena was a hero. She was a shining example that courage and character could overcome any bias. Their applause was a chorus of hope. It reverberated beyond the room. That hope inspired them to demand better in their own careers. Their hands clutched notebooks filled with lessons they'd learned from her story. They were determined to uphold the fairness Lena had fought for. They wanted to ensure stories would no longer be judged by the storyteller's skin. One young journalist, a Latina woman in her late 20s, felt a deep connection to Lena's story. Her own experiences with prejudice in the industry flashed through her mind as she listened. Her pen paused over her notebook. She whispered to a colleague, "She's the reason I'll keep fighting. I'll make sure every voice gets heard." Her voice was thick with resolve. It mirrored Lena's own. That resolve would shape the future of media in ways Lena couldn't yet foresee. Lena's story reached beyond the conference hall. It touched the hearts of those who heard it. It was a story of justice that could heal the deepest divides. It showed that one act of courage could change an industry if someone was brave enough to act. Dear viewer, her journey reminds us of the power we hold to make a difference. It shows us the power to turn bias into a moment of strength. That power starts with us. Have you ever faced prejudice and transformed it into a moment of triumph? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear your victories, just like Lena's. They remind us of the resilience we all carry within us. If this story touched you, like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more tales of justice and kindness. These are stories that inspire us to build a world where fairness isn't a dream. It's a world where no one is judged by their cover. Change begins with you. It starts with every heart we lift, with every step we take toward a better tomorrow.